Welcome back to this channel English Literature with Irdam. I'm back with a new topic and that is multiculturalism. As many students requested me to upload a video on this emerging area in literary theory and criticism, and I felt that I should make you all aware of this new and emerging area in English literature. And if you are preparing for any competitive exam or eligibility exam in English literature, then this video is going to be helpful in your preparation. So today we are entering into a world of many characters, many places, many societies, many cultures, many perspectives, many nations. So before entering into this new world, let me ask you a question. That when you read the English literature today, do you read only England? Of course not. Because when we read English literature today, we read India, Africa, America, Australia, and diaspora communities. Then broken identities, alienation. So we read the different characters, different cultures, different societies, different nations. So this is what we call as the multiculturalism. Multiculturalism itself, as the word defines that, it talks about the multiple cultures. And if you are an Indian living abroad, then there you are representing your own culture as well as the foreign culture. So any literary text keeps within it multiple cultures, multiple voices, multiple characters. So all these plural perspectives, voices are read in multiculturalism. What is multiculturalism then? Multiculturalism means many cultures existing together. And it's not about the one culture, it's about the multiple cultures. They are existing together and they are not separate actually. These cultures are not separate. They are always in negotiation. They are always interrelated. They are not silent. They always interact, communicate, engage with each other. And they are always in conversation. It means that multiculturalism doesn't talk about one particular culture. It talks about multiple cultures at once. It sees multiple cultures through the different perspectives, through the different angles. As Bhikkhu Parekh in famous book, The Rethinking Multiculturalism, published in 2000, argues that multiculturalism is about the proper terms of relationship between different cultural communities. It requires not only that they coexist, but they should be able to influence and enrich each other. So as Bhikkhu itself defines multiculturalism as a relationship between the different cultures, and it doesn't only require to coexist, but they should be influencing, interacting, and enriching to each other. So it means that both the cultures are always in emergence. As Raymond Williams also said that our culture is always emerging. We are changing the old order and adapting something new. So this is the situation of cultural being, cultural becoming. So Bhikkhu says that multiculturalism means both culture exist together and they are interacting, emerging, and enriching to each other. And Charles Taylor also in the famous book The Politics of Recognition, published in 1992, says that multiculturalism is a framework where equal recognition of cultures is not just a courtesy but a vital human need. So he says that multiculturalism must recognize the different and diversified cultures, and it is the need of the human in society as well. It's not a courtesy but a dire human need. We must understand the new cultures, we must adopt the new cultures and the positive things in the new cultures and leave out the old ones. So in literature, multiculturalism primarily focuses on cultural diversity, racial and ethnic identities, migration and diaspora, hybridity and mixed cultures, marginalized and silenced voices. So multiculturalism particularly talks about the diversified cultures, various cultures living and existing at the same time at the same place. Then racial and ethnic identities. Those people who are who are migrated are people who are living in a particular community and people who are belonging to different races. They are also discussed under multiculturalism. So multiculturalism also talks about hybridity and the mixed cultures, because our cultures are not innocent, they are not liberal, they are not autonomous, but they are mixed up. They are interrelated and connected with different cultures. As Homi Bhabha also gave the concept of hybridity, where two different cultures meet to create a new one. So in this sense, multiculturalism also talks about the multiple cultures existing together and they are mixed up. And it also talks about those all voices which are marginalized and which are silenced traditionally and historically. Suppose Dalit literature was ignored and suppressed, and subaltern voices were also suppressed. So multiculturalism gives values to each and every voice, each and every character, and each and every person. And it it reminds me of Jacques Derrida, who talks about a deconstruction of language, a meaning, and where different perspectives and ideas are given the equal importance. There is no hierarchy, there is no boundary between the uh, superior and inferior one, but there is the similarity, there is the equality between the different entities. Multiculturalism also gives the importance to every entity, and it questions one powerful idea, that why should one culture dominate literature? Suppose in multiculturalism, if we study William Shakespeare in the universities or the colleges, why other writers are suppressed or left out? Why they are not studied? Why one culture always dominates? Why in the post-colonial sense, or why in the colonial perspective, the colonials were superior? The Western culture was dominated on the Eastern one. So multiculturalism says that because various cultures living together, they are enriching and influencing to each other, then the language, stories, or imagination are not the ownership of any one culture. It means that every culture takes the influence of language, stories, imagination from the different cultures. So they are always evolving, they are enriching to each other. They are not owning their own language. Our stories are the imaginations. And how multiculturalism entered into English literature? For a long time, English literature was centered on white British imperial voices. But now time has been changed and colonialism has been spreaded across the world through colonies. And then we see independence movements, migration to Britain and America, diaspora communities, and globalization. So wherever these Westerners moved, their stories moved with them. And English literature slowly transformed into world literature written in English. And here are some famous theorists of multiculturalism. Stuart Hall says that cultural identity is not fixed. He says that our identity is not something we are born with, but it is something we are always becoming. So it talks about the cultural identity, which is always emerging, which is always becoming. So identity is not fixed. Indian and Western, when these culture meet, they give emergence and birth to a new culture. And this new culture is always evolving. It is always in the process of becoming. So Stuart says that our cultural identity is not fixed, and according to him, our cultures are fluid because they are always moving, they are always in the process of becoming something new, and our identity changes with history, migration, and memory. So our cultural identity is always changing. It's not static, it's not fixed, but it is dynamic and it is fluid. For example, a Caribbean writer living in Britain does not belong to just one culture, and their identity is layered. So it's the finest example of a Caribbean writer who migrates to Britain, living there, and he doesn't specifically represent one culture, but representing multiple cultures, and his identity is layered. So there are multiple identities with a Caribbean writer living in Britain. For example, Sam Salvin's The Lonely Londoners and George Lemming's In the Castle of My Skin are the finest literary examples of the multiculturalism. And these texts show that how the characters and the people are caught between home and exile, past and present, belonging and alienation. And next comes Homi Baba. Homi Baba talks about the hybridity and the third space in post-colonial perspective, but his concept and idea is also taken for the multicultural perspective. Homi Baba introduces the concept of hybridity, which means that our culture do not remain pure. When cultures meet, they mix up and then something new is created. So Homi Baba says that our culture is not our own. Our culture is not our own. It is not pure. It is not static, but it is mixed up, it is shared culture, and it is influenced by somebody else culture also. And he talks about the third space, that when two different cultural spaces meet, they give space to a new one. It is very much similar to when we mix up the two colors, they give birth to a new color. So that third color or the third space is what Homi Baba calls as the third space. So when any Indian meets with a Westerner, or when post-colonial people want to become the Westerners, they are not completely Indian, they are not completely Westerners, but they are in between. They are something new. So that new space is called the third space. And as Homi Baba says that the Britishers, Indian and African, when they meet, they become something new. They are not completely British or Indian or African. And Salman Rushdie's Midnight Children and Satanic Verses and Zadie Smith's The White Teeth, they are the example of this third space and hybridity. And these texts show that how the characters speak in mixed languages, live, live between traditions, and carry the fragmented identities. So Homi Baba says that when there is any cultural confusion, it can also be creative. So cultural confusion for him is a creative culture, or something new is becoming, new is coming in the culture. So it's an emergent space as per the Homi Baba. Next is Edward Said, who talks about the power, representation, and Orientalism. And sometimes he is considered as the propounder of the post-colonial theory in the book Orientalism, published in 1978. So Edward Said exposes something uncomfortable, and he exposes the misrepresentation of the East. That how Western people represent the East, how they portray the Eastern countries or colonial countries picture and mirror it as something which is exotic, backward, dangerous, and mysterious. And even V.S. Naipaul, in famous book India, an Area of Darkness, shows the dark side of India and portrays it as exotic, backward, dangerous, something negative. Later on, Nissim Ezekiel, in the famous essay Naipaul's India Mind, clarifies the Naipaul's stance and says that your portrait and perspective of seeing India is quite different, and that is unreal. That is not genuine. That is not truthful. And Edward Said says that when West represents the East as something exotic, mysterious, backward, as something unpleasant, then it is a process of Orientalism. So according to Edward Said, the literature already existing and written is a tool of domination. It supports political power. It has some latent power nexus. And all the stories, characters, and voices are the perspectives are helpful in justifying the colonial rule. Colonial rule. And Edward Said says that our existing literature itself helps to justify the colonial domination, the superiority, discrimination, and the hierarchies in society. And there are literary examples like Rudyard Kipling's imperial narratives, E.M. Foster's A Passage to India, are colonial travel writing, as I mentioned earlier of V.S. Naipaul. They are the finest example of the Orientalism. And they are the finest example of how West sees the East. And next comes the Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak. As I earlier said that multiculturalism gives voice to the subaltern and subjugated voices also. So Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak's the famous essay Can the Subaltern Speak, published in 1981, asks a question that can the subaltern speak and who the subalterns are? Subalterns are the voices who are colonized, who are poor, and mostly they are women and other silenced groups. So Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak argues that even when somebody else tries to speak for the subalterns, their voices are often filtered through power. Think of the Jutan by Om Prakash Valmiki, where Om Prakash writes his own experience of being a Dalit, being a subaltern, or being at the subjugated place. And if somebody else writes or speaks for Dalit, suppose if somebody else has written the untouchable experience or that book Jutan, that person may not have justified with the Dalit experience. It means that the real experience is shared by those who have been the part of that power nexus, who have been part of that subjugation and subalternity. Gayatri Chakravarti says that nobody else can speak for subalterns. And if somebody speaks, then even the voice is not innocent. It is politically motivated and it is misrepresentation of the Dalits. So at the end, in this essay even, Gayatri Chakravarti says that the subalterns can't speak. If somebody else speaks for them, he may not justify with your voices and the experience. And if they speak, then their voice is suppressed and subjugated by the dominant classes, the dominant cultures. So Mahesweta Devi's Draupadi or Jean Rai's White Sargassoti, they show that how the subalterns are suppressed and marginalized and how the women are doubly marginalized and how the colonialism and the patriarchy intersect. Next is the Paul Gilroy, who has given the concept of the Black Atlantic. And Paul Gilroy says that our Black identity is not national, but it is transnational. So he says that the Black experience, the racism, is not only in one country, in one nation, but it is across the nations. And it is shaped by slavery, music, memory, and the migration. And Paul Gilroy says that the Black consciousness, the Black experience, the Black identity is transnational and it is historically suppressed by different cultures, different societies, and it has been suppressed by a long rooted slavery and the migration. And Toni Morrison's Beloved and Carol Phillips' Crossing the River are the finest example of this black consciousness, are the black identities. And it shows that how black people are taken in different societies and how their identities are exploited, how they are misrepresented, how they are excluded from mainstream society, how they are considered as something which is non-human or subhumans. And multiculturalism talks about these all experiences. And for example, various works like Things Fall Apart represents and highlights the clashes of the cultures. Then Buddha of Suburbia talks about the immigrant identity. Americana talks about the race and global identity. And Small Island talks about the post-war migration. So this way, multiculturalism is not singular. Remember that it is plural, and it makes our literature plural. It's why multiculturalism matters today, because it expands our literary canon. It breaks Eurocentrism, and it reflects the real world diversity. It makes literature inclusive. Eurocentric Eurocentric perspective is questioned in the multiculturalism. For example, if we say that Kashmir is the Switzerland of India, but why don't we say that Switzerland is the Kashmir of Europe? It means that we are keeping the Eurocentric biasness in centered. And this multiculturalism doesn't give the central space at the dominant place to any particular culture. It gives the equal voices, equal values to the different cultures. And it multiculturalism also reflects the diversity in the real world, and it includes every perspective, every world,